Hey everybody, tonight we're going to be discussing the amendment process and the Bill of Rights again. So a lot of this stuff might be review for you if you learned it the first time. Here's to saving time the second time around. So what you need to know for tonight, we're covering two objectives tonight because, again, 2.8 is something that you should already know. So 2.7 is identify the amendment process, and 2.8 is basically the Bill of Rights. So your vocab tonight are the amendment, the amendments, to propose, and to ratify. So the amendment process is pretty simple. The vocab here is probably the most difficult part. So if you don't have these written down somewhere, please make sure that you do that. So this amendment, propose, and ratify. So the amendment process is described in Article 5 of the Constitution. And basically what it says is that somebody has to have an idea. Okay, there are some good ones, there are some really bad ones, and if you want to know them, just do a Google search. But it comes from an idea, and of course 2/3 of Congress has to propose this or to introduce it. Okay, and so once 2/3 of Congress agrees on it, then it goes to the states themselves. So 3/4 of the state legislatures have to ratify. So it's 3/4 of 50. For those of you who are really good at math, you can figure out what that is. So at that point, it becomes an amendment to the Constitution. Now, we've only had a few of these over the course of our history itself. So by the end of the course, you will know all of these, but we've only amended or changed the Constitution 27 times in our nation's history. So something that was written 200 years ago, most of us probably put on a shirt in the morning and then have to change it 12 times before we can even leave the house. So the idea is that we don't want it really easy to be able to change the Constitution. Otherwise, we would change it all the time. So pretty difficult process in order to actually amend or to change the Constitution. So the First Amendment deals with the freedom of religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. The Third Amendment is the right not to quarter soldiers or to not have to house soldiers in your home. Fourth Amendment is no unreasonable searches and seizures. You have to have a search warrant, and of course that needs to be signed by a judge or a magistrate. The Fifth Amendment has 5 different parts because we like to kind of combine when necessary. So we'll go through them in order. The grand jury basically determines that there is enough evidence for a trial. So at this point in time, most of you probably understand what the petite jury is, and those are the people who determine whether or not a person is guilty or not guilty of a crime. But before it even gets to that, a lot of cases have to go through the grand jury, and the grand jury determines if there was enough evidence to actually go to trial. Double jeopardy, you can't be tried twice for the same crime. Eminent domain, the government can take your property, private property, for public use so long as they pay you for it. The due process of law is basically making sure that you have a fair a fair legal opportunities in the country, including a fair trial. You get to plead the Fifth, means that you do not have to incriminate yourself. You don't have to tell on yourself. You don't have to testify against yourself. Of course, you are innocent until proven guilty. The Sixth Amendment has 3 different parts. You have a speedy trial, and it's also public. You have the right to call witnesses, and you have the right to a lawyer. The Seventh Amendment says that you can have a jury trial in cases where the amount is more than $20. So, yes, jury trial in cases over $20. So make sure if you're going to lend somebody $20 or that you that you make sure that you get at $21 or $20 and at least a penny so that you can have a trial by jury. The Eighth Amendment deals with no excessive bail and no cruel and unusual punishment. So we'll talk a little bit further about these in class for us to be able to understand them a little bit more deeply. The Ninth Amendment is a little bit more difficult than any of these other ones, which basically says, and it's down here in the blue, the enumeration or the listing in the Constitution. We talked about that, the enumerated powers last time, right? So there's the ones that are listed and almost bullet pointed. Of certain rights shall be construed or interpreted to deny or disparage or weaken others retained by the people, the Ninth Amendment of the United States. So basically what it says is that anything that is not listed in the Constitution as a specific right of the federal government or of the state government, those are going to be people's rights. So we understood there are going to be rights that are not listed in the Constitution that were still need to be maintained for the people and by the people. So the most obvious of all of these is probably something like privacy. Okay? Nowhere is it written in the Constitution that you have the right to privacy. It's just kind of an understood thing. And so when people cite that, and they cite different parts of the Constitution when we're talking about the right to privacy and the right to not have their phones tapped or the right to not have a drone peeking in their window or whatever the case may be, then they're going to be citing the Ninth Amendment because it's a people's right. Last but not least, we have the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment deals with states' rights. So if you remember back to the different types of powers, this is the reserved powers. Reserved powers are reserved for the federal government, for the state governments. And so the state governments are going to have these specific powers, the right to licenses, election laws, schools, all those different things come through the states.